Okay, here we go. Welcome everybody to CryptoZombies, where we bring you the best brains in blockchain. So excited to be here with y'all today, and we can discover a little bit about what's happening in the news and current events and all sorts of cool technology. So without any further ado, Hooman, do you want to introduce our guests and the panelists for today?
I do. First of all, we're all in different areas. Chris, where are you?
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Nick, where are you?
Aptos, California.
I'm in Washington, D.C., and our show today is brought to you by Witty, Witty.com, a global community of amazing people helping you stay on top of innovation. If you're looking to get AI ready and dive into what's next, including a lineup of exciting Web3 programs, join witty.com/join. And it's because of Witty that we have our amazing guest, Ed. Awesome. Ed, we want you to tell us about yourself, give us a little bit of your background, and let us know where you're dialing in from.
Awesome. Happy to be here, you guys. Big fan of all of you, actually. I did some research on you guys, and I'm excited to do this. So my name's Ed Prado. I am here in beautiful Newport Beach. Big waterman right here. And I've lived I grew up in Los Angeles on the beach, big waterman, big surfer. I was an LA County beach lifeguard for 8 years. Played water polo in college. So basically love the water, never left the water. And the idea of living in Texas or even Minneapolis would flip me out.
So, a shot at you, Chris. Don't forget that.
Yeah, but it is beautiful out there.
I don't live here. I live in California.
Exactly. And actually, Chris, I saw you went to Bellarmine. I went to Loyola High School. So
okay, perfect. There we go.
I went to Sarah.
And exactly, and Newman went to Sarah. So yeah, we got
amazing. We got some private school battles.
My 16-year-old is at Bellarmine right now, and my daughter, my 15-year-old daughter, is at Notre Dame in Belmont. So
that's amazing.
I almost said Sacred Heart, which would be wrong.
Good stuff.
Ed, let's dive in here. That's a good background. You pioneered online bond trading, right? Even before crypto existed. How do you see that early disruption compared to what blockchain is doing now in the capital markets?
Yeah, so I missed this in the intro, but basically I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. Studied entrepreneurship in college. My dad was an entrepreneur, my grandparents were entrepreneurs, and basically got right into it. And probably went into one of the hardest sort of segments back then, which was investment banking and becoming a broker-dealer. And if you know anything about that world, you know how regulated it is and how painful it could be. And us in crypto certainly know that, by our friend Gensler, who's just ruined our life.
Oh,
I know that's a hot one, so I got to throw it out there.
Gary Gensler has been a very popular punching bag. I did spend some time with Paul Atkins this past week in Jackson Hole, Gary Gensler's successor, and it was a very positive set of conversations.
Oh, nice.
Night and day, man. We got to embrace this. This is going to change the world. Anybody in the whole compliance and regulatory regime that would shut this down is a fool. But going back, so I started this brokerage firm, was very intrigued by the internet. And in 94, I bought a bunch of domain names, and one of them was tradebonds.com. And being a bond trader, I just kind of imagined hey, maybe someday, this stuff will go online. And if you know anything about the bond market, and Chris, I understand you've got some big project going on, we'll talk about that. The bond market was basically the most fragmented sort of non-transparent market there was back in the 90s, 80s, 90s, 70s. It was 10 times bigger than the stock market, yet it had no listing function. There was no price discovery. You would call 5 dealers and they give you, there'd be 20% sort of give on pricing. So it was like a mechanism for the large firms, the Goldmans and to make a ton of money. And the idea hit me when the internet started getting larger in 98. I'm like, wow, we should really put this all online. And the way it functioned is they would send you a fax run of their inventory. And what we were doing is we were taking the fax runs, we were OCRing it, and then we were posting it online.
Awesome.
And quickly I made a lot of enemies because these larger firms started realizing that their pricing was getting out in the marketplace through this amazing network called the internet. And they started calling me like, hey, Prado, we're cutting you off of our runs.
Take that down.
We hear you're marking them up and putting them online. But it was a fascinating sort of time and place in that we were disintermediating, a very large market with transparency. And when you actually look at where we're at now with blockchain, we're disintermediating this very centralized, databases and way of thinking with a very kind of novel, distributed sort of way of thinking. So it's very akin. It's amazing if you lived, and Chris, boy, I know you lived it. If you lived the internet sort of, 1.0 to blockchain 1.0, there's so many similarities in the way that it was propagated. And there's also some dissimilarities. Like back then, it was so institutionally driven. You had so many, everything was about going to a venture fund and, raising money and doing that. And crypto was very different. It was very it was about the people and it was angel funders. And then, eventually the venture guys came in.
Ed.
Yes.
That was a really thorough, great explanation. Thank you. I want to talk about blockchain because now I'm going to bring you and Chris together.
Yes.
Chris, this dude right there is a huge fan of alchemy.
Excellent.
Talk about blockchain, talk about alchemy, talk about your 91 sort of apps that you involve. Give Chris an overview, and then the two of you guys can talk for a few minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, so what we did with Rare, it started out real simple. We had this technology that was using an NFT, which we've all heard of, and we all connotate it with art, but it's far different than that. We were using NFTs as a proxy for digital rights management. So if you own the NFT, you can open the movie, and very novel idea. This was 5 years ago. We raised some money on it. We were out there. Unfortunately, we were way ahead of the market. As we were talking about the utility of an NFT, people were selling, monkey pictures associated with an NFT. And that market was it was the greatest and worst thing. The greatest because it educated the consumer that you could actually own something on the blockchain. So that was good. But then there was all these scams and things that sort of really kind of sidetracked the technology. But all along we were building infrastructure, and we ended up with an NFT marketplace. We ended up with 91 integrations, and we're talking the way to build applications faster. Because one of the problems in blockchain is that it's hard to build the apps. It's very nuanced. Everything's changing. There's a lot of integration that's duplicated that you really don't need to deal with, but you have to deal with because there's no real standard methods to kind of import them. So we built a protocol, and Rare Protocol has 91 integrations, and one of the larger ones is Alchemy. We're very friendly with Alchemy. We have a deal with Alchemy. Rare Protocol is open source, but every time somebody uses the Alchemy API, Alchemy basically gives us a referral fee. So we've been very active with them. We were one of the pioneers that piloted their account abstraction. So we did a lot of work with account abstraction. And we see them as they are truly, they're going to be the AWS in the space. I know that's what they tout, but I think their mission, they're going to get there. And they're really smart. Nikhil's amazing. Just a bunch of smart, bright guys. And we've enjoyed working with them. And, they're one of many people in this space that we think are doing amazing things and are in it for the long haul. Because we saw so many charlatans here early on that were in it for the quick buck. Didn't work. 2 years later, they're, and we saw that in the internet, with sock puppets. It was all these companies that thought that they could basically buy a domain, sell, disintermediate, mom and pop stores. It didn't happen. So that's
Chris, do you agree with what he said about alchemy?
Well, of course I do. I mean, so the alchemy was the pivot to alchemy from down to lunch was largely sort of a series of conversations that Joe and Nikhil and I had, about 7 years ago now, and that they had been building, after building a very successful social startup called Down to Lunch. They had been working on crypto projects on the side, and they came to me one Sunday. It was a Sunday after they had played ultimate frisbee at the Stanford Oval. I live close to the Stanford campus, and they had they were saying, hey, there's these hedge funds that want to pay us for our Ethereum query tool, and they want to pay us $50,000 or $100,000 a month for that. And I said, you don't want to be a job shop for hedge funds. What do you think the business is here? And that's where we started talking about AWS for blockchain. And I said to them, I don't know what that means, and you don't know what that means for sure, but let's talk about it some more. And they built it, and they built what really has become that robust service. And we've taken it multi-chain. We've done all these different things, and look, those guys continue to execute every day. It's one of the most two of the most impressive entrepreneurs I've ever met, and I've had the pleasure of working with Mark Zuckerberg and with Larry and Sergey and with and Eric Schmidt. Like it's a truly impressive company that I love working with every day. And this space is being facilitated by what they've built and what they've done, and it's great to hear it from a customer.
Well, Ed, now that you have Chris on, tell him your biggest issues with Alchemy, things you'd like them to change. Tell him right now.
The customer feedback is the core of everything.
Where do I start? No, we got a very positive. We are basically a very good partner to them. We've launched, like I said, when they did account abstraction, we were one of the first to kind of chew it out and basically create apps out of it so that it would have some sort of, some street cred testing. And then we put it out to an entire hackathon in India with, we had like 10,000 participants. So it was great. It was a really great. And then we'd report back to them and we'd fix code and we'd kind of go back and forth, but they're great. I have no gripes about them. And I think that Nikhil is I've never even met him, sadly, but he's an incredible entrepreneur in that he watches for signal in the market. And I'm sure you helped him do this. But from my understanding, 10 years ago when he raised money from, angel investors like yourself, he was just doing social media. He was basically looking for market signal to kind of insert himself and create a tremendous amount of value. And his timing was insane. Like if you charted, Alchemy's timing on their funding, and sort of like even the NFT event, how that really just pumped their sales. And I know at some point they could have been bought out. I think Google was going to buy them or something. I'm sure you.
There've been a whole bunch of interesting acquisition offers from a number of players in the space. And
you're going to very happily those?
Very happily independent at this point.
Hey Chris, how much do these guys offer? Give us an idea. Come on.
They can't disclose that.
Yeah, they can. Don't defend him, Nick. What are you doing?
The public information out there is that we raised, the last raise was in 2022, and it was $200 million at a $10.2 billion valuation. So that's the public information that's out there.
Pretty significant. Yeah. Actually, Ed, I did have a quick question for you. So you were able to take all these lessons from the internet and then apply it moving forward, mainly on like distribution and transparency. And the bond market's been around for a while, right? It started with Venice when they were raising money to fight Constantinople. So it's a pretty interesting history, right? So how are you thinking about signal or pattern recognition in building products moving forward, Ed?
That's interesting. I mean, we are speaking with foundations, Web3 foundations and enterprises every day. And we are basically asking for pain points. One of the things you get really wrapped up in is imposing technology where it doesn't necessarily need to be. Like the internet was a perfect example of that. People were like, oh, we could do this .com or that .com. And in the end, not everything needs to be a website. Some businesses actually don't need, they'll use it in some way, but and just like the blockchain, everybody was like, oh, I'm going to do this on the blockchain, not on the blockchain. You need to solve a problem. And you also need to solve a relevant problem that's here and now. And I think that is something that gets missed by entrepreneurs as they're looking to do the next sort of big company, and they get wrapped up in ideas. They get basically vetted into like a vacuum of concepts from their own founders but you need to solve a problem. So we built this great protocol, and we're like, oh, this is gonna be great. We're gonna have people building off of the protocol. Well, that's happened a little bit, but let's talk about the blockchain. It's really not, it hasn't been scaling to the massive sort of proportions that everybody thought it would. So then we forward integrated, and we just built this and delivered a product 6 months ago called DevDapp. And what DevDapp does is it basically creates an incentive system for developers within GitHub. So we know GitHub is this big task management platform. It's owned by Microsoft. There's 100 million developers in there, but there's no way to incentivize developers to do things. So we have created this incentive layer. We OAuth a web wallet into it, and we use Alchemy's web wallet for that. Mm-hmm. We abstract the wallet. It's really easy. You log in with your GitHub credentials, and then you're in GitHub, and then you're basically doing tasks that blockchain companies need you to do, and then they reward you, and then it's all done on chain. We pay you in stables, we pay you in their coins, and then we have an AI moderator that actually compiles the code and makes sure that whatever your contribution was, it actually working. Right. So that's a great example of there's a problem. These web foundations are very long capital, but very short utility. So they want to encourage developers to jump on and do something for them. Hey, this is what we're doing. We're having a hackathon. We're doing a bounty. We're doing the grants. All those have been sort of off-chain programs that have been scammed. This pays you for code, and it incentivizes and pays you for code. So that is a very good example of listening to the market, because we listen to these customers, and I'm like, what are you guys doing right now? What is happening? They're like, well, we've got this. If you look at the whole blockchain ecosystem, there are so many chains around. There's like 150 L1s. Like, obviously, some of these chains are going to fall off, but for these chains to survive, they need to attract developers. And that's what we do. We basically have created a mechanism that can bring them developers. So that's where we're at.
This seemed to be a good North Star, just like attract the developers, that can provide a good foundation,
Exactly. And of course, as you're talking about developers, then AI comes into the play. And you're like, well, in the future, are there even going to be developers? Like, what does the future look like? And we're sort of grappling with that. And one of the things that we're working on currently is an AI starter kit. If you've worked with, Cursor or Windsurfer, any of these IDEs, that, junk in, junk out. You basically need to start with some elementary rules so that whatever app you're building on these models works. And so one of the things that we're integrating into what we're doing is an incentive-based rules engine, where if you're a blockchain, an L1 and L2, you're not only incentivizing your developers to come do work for you, but you're also incentivizing them to create rules so that AI vibe coders can basically use your chain in a very easy way, where it comes out and results in something positive versus it just not working.
Well, and then we've seen the rise of digital asset treasury companies now, who will have a lot of crypto gathered, to use a number of these different protocols and to experiment with them. And I'm actually sitting with my partner in the digital asset treasury company that we're putting together right now, with Scott Honors over here.
That guy.
So as we sit in Minneapolis, although we're distributed a little bit everywhere.
Hold on, Chris. We have some questions about this treasury company. We have some questions. When is it launching? What's it called? And give us a little taste of what it is you do.
Shall I preview the name with the marketplace?
Here we go.
So we're going to be called Rising Tide Crypto Corp, and we'll have more to say about it in the coming days.
What's Scott's role? What does he do? Just kind of hang out?
So Scott's a sort of longtime private equity and expert investment banker and a good partner who's got a small little shop in Manhattan with a couple of friends that we're all in favor of the transformation of the crypto economy.
That's amazing. All right, let's get back to Ed here real quick. That's great, Chris. We can't wait to hear more about this treasury company. Ed, what coins are you invested in? And are you invested in the Trump coin? Let's hear it.
Not invested in the Trump coin, long ETH, long Bitcoin. And I really don't play in a lot of these like trash coins. We have worked for some foundations that have been given tokens and projects, and we're holding those. But the way I see it is I'm so exposed, devoting my full time into the crypto space, that doubling down and buying a bunch of crypto tokens is probably not within my best interest. So I'm not, and it just takes so much time. Like, I'm a trader at heart, so I can consume my entire life, watching and trading and flipping, but that's probably not the most productive thing, nor is it what I want to do now. I did that for 25 years. That's not something I want to, capacitate myself with, even though I could probably, make a lot of money. I'm into creating, kind of taking all my past sort of educational and experiences and creating something that is going to be meaningful to the space. That's really my focus.
You mentioned,
it's interesting you mentioned Trump coin, because I just saw in the news today that Trump Media and Crypto.com announced a deal to form a crypto treasury firm as well. So it seems like there's good momentum in the space.
Is this Chris's competitor? Chris, is this your competition, bro?
Well, they're obviously, they've gone bigger. They've tried to protect the Trump Media and True Social stuff by backing it up with a bunch of Bitcoin, which is, I think, a smart strategy for them. I don't think they're really, this new venture, I don't think is going to be, I think it's going to be more of a competitor of like Anchorage and Kraken and a number of those players who are and Coinbase, who are trying to be, custodians in the space. I hadn't seen this announcement yet, but I'm not shocked that they would attempt to do this. At the SALT conference in Wyoming, Eric Trump was out there with Anthony Scaramucci. So Scaramucci has been forgiven by at least one member of the Trump family for the sort of complaints about the president that he continues to issue. But they were focused on American Bitcoin, which is a miner that's used for Bitcoin mining with the facilities that they've done a deal with one of the classic Bitcoin miners to do this American Bitcoin play. So they were rolling that out at this very influential conference. It was a fascinating time. That, like I said earlier, I spent time with Paul Atkins there, the SEC chair. There's very good sort of government presence. And a lot of folks in the industry, including some other major custodians like Anchorage and other players like that.
I do love that a lot of the Democrats love Trump's crypto policy. Puts a big smile on my face. Ed, you started off talking about Gensler. Give us your thoughts. Like, what kind of guy was he? What were your biggest problems with him? Let's do our Gensler moment of the show.
I mean, I think it's funny because you can ask any crypto guy and it's the same answer. I mean, this guy really put up a roadblock, and the roadblock wasn't from a regulatory standpoint, it's political. And end of story. I mean, for me, being an old school Wall Street guy, that's just crazy. And it really caused, I guess it did two things to the space. One, it made us all go abroad and create these funky DAOs. And we sort of navigated the waters. One of the things it sort of did too, that maybe was a blessing, and this is kind of a weird way to look at things, but it gave the smaller firms a head start, because a lot of this Gensler stuff spooked every large firm, and they were too scared to even do anything. But in the end, it did hold back the space in general, from a capital standpoint, and even from an opportunity standpoint. I mean, we built this amazing NFT technology, and then we'd present it to US corporations. They're like, well, we can't get involved in the NFT market, they're securities. So you had a lot of that silliness that was happening. So it's sad. I mean, I think we've lost a lot of time. But certainly I think I think Trump, and he's not perfect, but this party's gotten more right than wrong. And I think that, like having David Sachs and the people he's brought in are just really bright and pro, crypto, pro AI. Like, these are big themes that if we're going to keep growing and keep our sort of pecking order in the world, they're paramount. We've got to keep keep an eye on this.
That is pretty cool though that you found a silver lining. Like it's a unique contrarian take on the setup. Also, real quickly, you mentioned being an old school Wall Street guy. Did you ever get a chance to work with Louis Ranieri?
No. I mean, I certainly know who he is, but no, I've never worked with Louis Ranieri.
Pretty interesting background. So, and also you mentioned you're a surfer, myself as well. Would love to go paddle out at some point here.
Love that. Yeah.
Nick is world class.
We'll get a Northern California. We'll get a Northern California, Southern California tournament going.
There we go.
We'll come visit you, and you can come visit us.
Yeah. And the winner gets 10 Trump coins.
We'll have a true board meeting up north.
Board meeting, exactly. Well, a board meeting off the coast at Mavericks.
Ed, I know you had a question for Chris. You can ask him. Go ahead. What was your question for Chris?
But I was just really curious about your new company, and it sounds like you sort of talked about it a little bit. So that was a majority of my question. The other question I had is, I know that you have a venture arm that has been somewhat active in the Web3 space, and what that looks like. Are you deploying capital? What are you looking for? What are you investing in?
Definitely deploying capital. Yeah. And looking at early stage, opportunities that solve problems in the space. And so, one of the most successful ones so far that we've done that we did at the seed stage was Hemi. Which got to mainnet and then to the token generation event, which is imminent at this point. That's been publicly announced, so I'm not talking out of school there. But designed to be a super secure bridge between Bitcoin and Ethereum. You take the two largest chains, and obviously most crypto is stolen or misappropriated or misdirected when you're doing cross-chain movement of value. And if you could build a system that between the two largest chains that was super secure and that had its own virtual machine around it, and that importantly, I mean, one of the things that I find most exciting about Hemi is how it allows for Ethereum style decentralized finance plays with Bitcoin. Bitcoin obviously is a less extensible system. It's sort of not natively able to do what Ethereum can do. Although we interviewed a project that's actually trying to do this natively on Bitcoin, and then obviously my good friend David Marcus is trying to make Lightning and Lightspark work as a Bitcoin payment, as Bitcoin Lightning payment system network. There are great things that are to be done with Bitcoin, but Hemi opens up the possibility of Ethereum style with an embedded EVM. In the Bitcoin validator has the ability to do this in a super secure fashion. So I'm very excited about it. So I'm looking for projects like that have a key core utility in the crypto space.
So Ed, you're doing all of these things 5 or 10 years from now. What will you have hoped to have cracked? What's like your mission for the next 5 to 10 years, so that when people think of Ed, they'll be like, you know what that guy did? He did.
Yeah. I would just love to be a significant sort of lightning rod in where AI meets Web3 and blockchain. I think there's a lot of opportunities that are going to evolve from that. And in particular, and it's funny because I'm not a coder per se, but I know enough to direct coders. And I also know enough that our future is going to be absent of a lot of coders, and that AI is actually going to take over. And in that framework, I would love to figure out how to make it so that, your average person can actually take business rules and logic and basically gen out something that between AI sort of being the thought machine and blockchain being the scorekeeper and being the trust unit can kind of collaborate to create something that's important. I always think back to, and I know this is real fundamental, like, maybe I'm too old, but Excel was like all of Wall Street's favorite program because you could actually go in there and run numbers. And before Excel, you had to give some guy, all the data, and he'd run it on Cobalt, and he'd come back with a bunch of computer lines. Yep. And it was like,
so initially, put it all in punch cards, right?
Exactly. Like, here's the punch cards, here's the result. And I keep thinking, like, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we get this sort of Excel version of blockchain and AI, that a person can put some rules into, and it actually comes back with something that works. And a lot of that, there's a little bit of it in vibe coding, but I think vibe coding is still, it's still not market ready for your average business sort of use case. But to be involved in that, I think would be really fascinating. And I think that's where we're headed in kind of taking our rules engine and working with GitHub and these developers and these foundations and trying to get to somewhere where they can stay relative, because let's face it, L1s depend on utility. They've got to be used.
Yeah.
And it's sort of an interesting thing because a lot of them are long treasury, but so short utility. And if we can bring some utility to them, I think their viability will actually, and their token will go up, and it kind of creates a very interesting sort of cycle. So that's what I'd like to. I would love to be part of the pieces that create that sort of Excel of the future that is a culmination of Bitcoin, of blockchain and AI.
Well, Nick, ask Ed the final question that you like to normally end with.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Hooman. This has been just a fascinating conversation. Ed, how do you think the CryptoZombies community, with the fans in over 80 countries, or in the top 5% of Spotify, how can we be valuable to what you're building? Would you like an introduction to investors, or maybe do you want to plug a website, or how can we be valuable to you?
You want to be Chris's best friend?
That's probably the most important part. But we're on Twitter. It's Rare Protocol. DevDapp.com is our website for the GitHub sort of agent that we've built. We are looking for investors. We're actually looking in front of investors. We're trying to really focus on revenue. I think the market's shifted. I think that these non-revenue generating, pipe dreams are fading away in the wind, and it's back to reality, much like back in 2003 when the .com bubble bust and everybody's like, show me the revenue. So we're really focused on working with some foundations. We have like 5, we're working with Flow, we're working with Avalanche, we're working with ApeCoin, we're working with Tezos, we're working with, so some big entities that, again, are trying to strategically bring in developers. I think that's really interesting in generating revenue. So any sort of introductions to those sort of people, and could even be like smaller, like we've focused on these really large ones because they've kind of come to us, but actually the product would work best with smaller ones that have money that just want to make a splash, because we can bring them developers and bring them some utility.
Well, Ed, thank you. Before we wrap it up, once again, thank you to Witty, a global community of amazing people helping you stay on top of innovation. They've got exciting stuff happening with Web3 AI. Check them out at witi.com/join. Nick?
This has been great. Well, check us out, CryptoZombies.com. And Ed, thank you so much for joining. Safe travels to all of you fellas.
Thanks so much, Ed.
And we'll see you guys next week. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right. See you soon. Thanks.
Are we done? Are we still on? Are we done or still on?